Well, good afternoon and welcome to lesson number one in our helper series, my master class, if you will. This one I'm calling Dressed for Success. And first of all, reminder, my name is Brian Martin, and I'm here to kind of walk through the beginning process of building your own helper. Now, what I'm not going to be able to do in these videos is actually build a helper using real data, because I have to respect copyright because I would have to show you me typing the information in, um, and I don't want to do that. So what we're going to do is build a helper that's based on some basic tables, just to give you a sense of how to pull data in. And we might use numbers, letters, names of presidents. We might do a bunch of different things. Excuse me. But the idea is to give you the basic concepts of how these things work. So today's video, it's going to be very short. It's called Dressed for Success. And that is, how do you start with a blank sheet of paper, a blank workbook, and start creating your universe and all that? Well, depending on how your Excel is set up when you open it, Excel usually opens with either 1 to 5 sheets. You're going to want to add a bunch of sheets because you're going to want a sheet for every single chart that there is in your chart book that you're trying to recreate. So if you're doing, say, for example, app of baseball, you have 8 on base charts, and you have a bunch of different pages in the booklet. So you're going to want to have a page for each one of those sheets. So we're just going to set this up here, and we're going to add and have a workbook of 15 sheets. We're not going to get too crazy, only because we don't want to. We're not going to build a fully fleshed out helper that you actually can use to play anything. We're just getting set up for how do you get your spreadsheet set up and how do you do some basic functions. So here's what I do. I add a bunch of sheets. You can add as many as you want. I'd say, look at your chart books. How many charts are there? Individual charts, and have a page for each one of those charts so that you can build one chart per page and just focus on those results and getting those results on paper and then getting them to pull into your helper just the way you want to. So dressing for success today will be setting up your workbook and setting up a couple of things that will be helpful to you as you move forward. So in any workbook, sheet one, or whatever the first sheet is to the left, I always call it helper or game. And I call it, this one I'm calling helper only because it's not really a game. We're not programming a game here. We're going to program a helper, something that would be, these principles would be used to help you convert paper charts into charts that are electronic and come with dice rolls and automatic lookups so that you can streamline your play and put yourself in a position where if you're on a laptop, you can carry your game anywhere. You can take it anywhere. You don't have to carry uh, anything but the cards. And the cards, in most cases, in many games, are much easier to store and put in a suitcase or an overhead bag or a carry-on than you know than carrying all the charts, especially if it's a large chart book, um, or a bulky chart book. I'm thinking second season football with all the flipping pages. So the first thing you do is just name the first page helper, and the other pages will be named after the charts. Use your own abbreviation scheme, but for now we're going to do a few things with cosmetics. And the best way that you can do this, and it allows you then to use uh, graph paper, is to turn your sheet into a piece of graph paper. Well, how do you do that? Well, you have to make squares. You can see the grid lines are already set for a certain height and width. So first thing you want to do is click in this upper corner here where this little arrow is and highlight the entire sheet. Then take your mouse and move it till you see that little arrow with a line. Click it and you'll notice see where it says width 8.57 and 65 pixels. Slide that over to like 20 and then drop it. You'll notice that all of the columns are now 20 wide. Then do the same thing with the rows. Find out where that little line with the arrows goes and drag that down till you get to 20 pixels. So these squares are 20 pixels by 20 pixels. What that now does is it gives you a great way to say, okay, what's the size of my real estate? What's the size of my screen? Well, the screen that's visible to me in its full entirety, without half cells, is 30 rows up and down by 65 columns left to right. So you could take a piece of graph paper of the proper size and scale and draw a box that's 30 by 65. That's your screen. And then you can use that graph paper to start laying out your design elements to create the windows that you'll be using for the helper. And one of the ways we do that is to use the merge cells feature. So I'm going to lose a little bit of real estate by doing this, but got the ribbon out, so we now can see less of the screen. And one of the things that you can do is before you do anything else is you can put a outside border on this. And if we do a quick print preview somewhere, and if we set the portrait to landscape, and we make it fit all on one page, no, it doesn't matter. But you can then, when you get down to the bottom or over to the sides, you'll run into these lines, and that will tell you that you're now off the screen that you were planning on. So one of the things that you want to do is you may want to say, let me set up my dice. I want my dice to be in the upper right-hand corner. So you would do a 4x4 block. So you highlight 4 cells. You would use the merge feature here to do a merge cells. And then you would copy that. Let's say it's a 3 dice game. You'd copy those blocks over, and then you would just type in 3 numbers. So, well, why do you do that? Well, that shows where they're going to appear. And then again, go back to this corner and highlight the entire sheet and click on this button right here, middle align. It moves everything to the middle of the cell. Then in the individual cells, you'll click center, and then you'll boost up. Just keep clicking till you get the font you want. I bold mine. You might want to say, well, I don't want to do that. I want to find a different font for mine. I've got this arrow font that looks kind of futuristic. You could do, the traditional, Times New Roman. I've got this other one that's called, what is it? I had it called X-Ball that has kind of a futuristic italicized look. Whatever you want, we're going to use X-Ball. And those will be the dice. If the dice have different colors, then we can say, okay, let's assume we're doing History Maker Baseball. You got a red, you got a black, and you got a blue. And you can put them in any order that you want, but you have those. And then just change the font to white. And now there's your 3 dice. Now eventually what you'll do is you'll populate these with actual random numbers that are going to generate for each one of those dice. So that might be your dice. Okay. So then maybe you want to have a window. Maybe this is again. I'll use for now. I'll use History Maker Baseball as the basis for this. Maybe this is where you want the norm, the first thing for your. So we do merge cells, and we get a nice white thing. And maybe you think the window will be, this big. And again, you can draw this out on a piece of paper. And you can see now I have my 3 columns that I have for my for that particular game book result. And let's say I always like to skip a few sheets here so that we don't, if we have things to add, we can put them there. So I just say, okay, here's where my normal result book will be. And that's where we're going to start. And That's where we're going to come in here. So you can do all sorts of things. You can make big boxes, little boxes. You can take something and you could even go across the top here in this top row and go all the way across to just about everything and do a merge, centered merge, and call it the uh, helper madness helper. And bold it and maybe italicize it and maybe put it in a nice, maybe a nice orange. You can pretty it up by merging cells and using colors and things like that. I always tell people for readability and stuff, you'll see how that, and I have a tendency to look at things with an eye for what looks good and looks clean. It doesn't look real clean that those dice are right up against the title line. So I would insert a row, which of course is going to recolor everything. And then you just sit there and you change the whole row to be no fill. And you've got some spacing now. Your dice aren't right on that. It looks better. Now, if you want to jam everything up and have one thing bleed right into the other because that's what you want, fine. Delete the extra rows. Every row you don't use is wasted space unless you find other ways to utilize it. And so that's how you would set your page up, and then you just play with it. Oh, I don't like that there, so I'm going to take that whole thing, I'm going to drag it and put it over here. I like my charts to be over here. Well, you can do that. You can decide that you want this to be a particular background color, like green. And then you're going to put a button on top of it. So one of the things that we'll do now is I'll show you the control panel. You just type in over here beyond this block, just type in word control panel or the word control panel, and then double click that column and it will automatically set the width. And so this is where you can start putting some variables, things that you want to do, like a dice. Let's say you want to keep track of how many times the dice have been rolled, dice counter. You can do that. And then there'll be a value that goes there. Anywhere you want to put a value, shade it a light blue. That's your reminder that you want to put something there, a formula, a value, a pre-computed value, whatever you like. You can also do another thing over here and call them button labels. I'm going to show you what I mean by button labels because this is something that I did not know. I'm going to show you the old way of doing it, and then I'm going to show you the way I learned in a stats class when I was doing my master's program, which I thought was cool. I'd never seen it before, and you can use this for anything you want. Let me type in my button label, let me type in norm, if normal. You could type in normal in its entirety. In the old days of creating buttons, you would go to Insert, it's now called Illustrations, and you'd pick Shapes, and you'd pick one of these shapes to use as a button. I like this little rounded rectangle. And what you want to do is, using the outline of the box, you put that in. Now it comes up blue, but then it goes to a formatting thing. So you'd say, well, I want my shape fill to be the same color green that I chose, and I want my text fill to be white. And then you would click on here. You double click, and you probably can't see if there's a little cursor there, and you would double click on the shape. There'd be a cursor. You type norm. And then you would adjust the shape of it. You would then go over here and center it in the middle and center it in the middle of the thing. And you might make the button a little more narrow. And you might actually then say, oh, you know what? I'm going to drag this out of the way. And I'm going to make this box just a little bigger by merging the cells. And now I don't need a background color. I'll just put that button right in there. There it is, norm. That's the old way of doing it. And the problem with doing it that way is anytime you make a change and decide that norm should be Bill, you have to double click on the thing. You have to type back here and type in Bill and do all of that. But there's a way to do this that you never have to do that again. And that is, if I go in here, double click this and take out that text and just leave the shape, if I click on the text and highlight it, so you see all the little handles on it, then click in the formula bar, go over here, scroll over, and click on that right there, and just hit enter. Okay. Oh, sorry, it needs to be equal. And that. Okay. Notice what happens? It says norm. Now I have to change this, double click, and highlight and change the font to white. Or I could just have hit the white button a couple times, that would eventually gone over. Now, what's nice about that is, if I decide to change it to Bill, I just type in Bill over here. Joanne, Mike, Cindy, umpire. And by creating that link that this shape is equal to the value in this cell, then I can just change the values. So if I were doing a dice counter and I have, let's say my dice roll, let's say I wanted to do a dice roll, that was a dice roll button. Let me copy this. Let me do a quick copy, Control C and Control V. Let's say I want to put a dice button over here. That every time I roll the dice, it brings back the value in the dice counter so I can see it. Okay, now because I made a direct copy of this, the formula is equal BZ3. But if I change that and hit equal BR3, nothing shows. But now my counter, I hit the dice button and it increments the counter by 1. I click on the shape and I go to home and I do white for the thing. And maybe I say, I'll click this, and maybe I want it bold, italic, and I want to bump that up to 12. So I click that button, now it says 1. I click the button the next time and it adds 1 to the counter, and it says 2. It picks up the value. So now, instead of having to change the buttons, you create the button, link the button to a formula value anywhere on the page, and as that value changes or you decide you want to change it, you can type those in and they will then be there for you. So your first thing would be to set up your front page. Where are my chart results going to be? So maybe your main results are all on this side and your smaller bunt charts and other stuff are down here at the bottom. Again, you're working with real estate, that when I turn this off and I say full screen mode, I can see the full screen and I can work off of that. And I can make whatever I want. So I've shown you how to merge some cells and color them and get them ready to go. I've shown you how to create a couple of buttons. You make the buttons any shape or size that you want. And if you can tie them or link them to values that are in your control panel, you can display all sorts of information without having to go back and forth to the control panel to find out what that information is. And so this is step 1. Get a piece of graph paper, find out what your real estate screen is, 20 pixels by 20 pixels for the size of the rows and columns. Figure out how big your screen is and what your real estate is when you're in full screen mode in Excel. Then get a piece of graph paper and a pencil and just start sketching in. It doesn't have to be perfect. Don't get a ruler. I want a 4 box here and a 4 box here and a 4 box here. And this is going to be 4 by 3 and this is going to be 8 by 9. And just sketch it out. And then once you've sketched it out and you've erased it a little bit and you've played around with it, put it on here, and then you can always drop and drag things. So the first part, dressing for success, getting this front page ready to go and the way you want it to look, means that now All of your other work is getting the charts built and getting the thing to work to bring those values from those charts into these cells that you see all over the front page, and how the windows work to turn the windows on and off. Some people might say, you know what, I just wanted to bring all the results in. I don't care. I'll figure out what they are. But you saw in my first video, I have things that turn the windows on and off. So only the window I'm looking at and the one I want is the one I see. And that makes it easier for me, and it allows me not to have to keep looking at a screen full of information trying to pick out that one or two lines out of a bunch of information. So dressing for success means get this page cleaned up and as good as you want it to be. You can always move it around later, but you get that particular page ready to go, and you are going to be in such great shape in terms of being able to then execute your plan into what that's going to look like. So that's our video for this time, dressing for success. We'll talk to you again real soon. Thanks again for watching, and until next time, good gaming, good night. We'll see you again soon.